along the vertebrae parallel to the aorta. That's the azygos. So it's very, very deep. It runs parallel to the aorta on the left side of this model. And that's the azygos. And that's a vein. Now, a quick thing to note for this section in general, for the practicum, it's going to be really important that you remember to put whether the vessel that's stickered is an artery or a vein. Okay? The general convention for depicting arteries versus veins in the models is that arteries are red, veins are blue. Okay? The reason that that's the convention is because it's really showing oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood is shown as red, deoxygenated blood is shown as blue. And I'm explaining that now because when we get to the heart and we talk a little bit about the pulmonary system, you'll see that that kind of switches because in the pulmonary system, you're actually having deoxygenated blood run through the arteries and oxygenated blood run back to the heart through the veins, okay? The name vein versus artery doesn't refer to whether it's oxygenated or deoxygenated. It's referring to whether it's leaving the heart or going to the heart, okay? That's kind of the difference between those two names. So really be cognizant of whether you're putting artery or vein and what the convention is for that, okay? Because red may not always be artery. Okay, so like I said, everything we're going to be talking about now is below the diaphragm. The first thing that we have is the celiac, and that's going to be in the artery, the arterial system. So you can see right after the diaphragm, we have our abdominal aorta, and there's a bunch of vessels that pull off of this abdominal aorta. That's what we're going to be focusing on. This list, starting at the celiac, working our way all the way down to the femoral and the arterial side, those are in order as how they come off of the abdominal aorta. So the first thing that we're going to see coming off is the celiac. The celiac is actually most commonly referred to as the celiac trunk because it's a place where 3 vessels come off of the aorta. So right after the diaphragm, and this is actually the best model for it, it's the only model that shows it, so do make sure you see the celiac in this model. Right after the diaphragm, you can see that there's a cluster of 3 arteries pulling off of the aorta. If we were to put a sticker right in the middle of this, we'd be asking for the celiac. Okay? Now, we're not going to be asking you to identify each one of the vessels. I don't know why, but you only need to know one of the vessels that comes off. And the one vessel that comes off is the splenic. Okay? And I can't for the life of me remember which one it is, and I didn't remember from my first class, so I'm just going to conventionally tell you it's one of these, and you're going to believe me, okay? So it's the one on the bottom left side, okay? And again, it's really not that important because we're not naming the other ones, so if we put a sticker in the middle, celiac, if we put a sticker on the lower left one, splenic, okay? And when we talk about the spleen, it'll make sense because that's the one that's the vessel that's closest to the spleen. The spleen's going to be off over here. Okay? That's why I'm guessing it's that one, but I actually don't remember. But I'm going to keep it consistent for my classes. All right, next we have the superior mesenteric. And actually, if you look at your list with me real quick, you'll see that we have a superior mesenteric and then 3 down, and an inferior mesenteric. A good way to remember these two is that they come off of the anterior portion of the aorta. We're going to see that some of the paired arteries that come off of the aorta come off on the sides. These 2 specifically come off right down the middle, okay? So that's kind of a good way to remember it. So if we look at our celiac trunk, we'll see that there's another single artery that comes off kind of just below it. That's going to be our superior mesenteric. Just kind of to help you with positions too if you're making notes, it's the one just superior to the renal vein. So you see this renal vein that comes across right here? The superior mesenteric artery is just above that. And the next one we're talking about is the renal artery and vein. So if you look here, we have our kidneys on either side in the model. The renal vein and artery are just the vein and artery going on either side to the kidney. Okay, so you can see the vessels leaving on either side. That one's kind of easy because you actually see the organ in there, right? So renal is referring to the urinary system, so the kidneys. Just remember that. Just a quick note too while I'm looking at this. Note that for veins, hepatic portal only needs to be known in the cat. Okay, so I'm not going to be talking about that today. We'll be talking about that more on Wednesday, but just note that. Okay, next we have the ovarian or spermatic. Now, The more conventional term is just gonadal. So if you would like to use gonadal in place of ovarian or spermatic, you may. These models actually, like, based on where the spermatic and or ovarian place, not and or, it's always going to be or, but depending on where it's going, you can tell whether it's male or female. So you can see with these ones, it's these tubes coming off on either side, next in line on the aorta. They drop all the way down through the pelvic floor. So because of that, and they're going to be going to the testes, you know that it's a male, because if it was a female, they'd be stopping a little higher up because the ovaries are embedded in the abdominal cavity. That's the way you tell. I don't expect you to know that difference. Just know that this one's going to the gonads. That's as far as I need you to know, okay? And it does kind of vary a little bit per model. So for the exam, if you were to call these ovarian arteries and or veins, depending on which one's tagged, I would totally accept that, okay? That's not something that I'm too worried about. So ovarian, spermatic, or gonadal, whichever tickles your fancy. It's these two long ones coming off on either side of the aorta and inferior vena cava, just below the renal. Okay, so it's next in line from the renal. And you'll see that they are pretty long. They're nice and rubbery, so they're not like this hard plastic. They're actually like extensions. Okay, and then next we have the inferior mesenteric. Again, that one comes off right dead smack in the center. It's actually the last little vessel to come off of the aorta before it splits. Okay? So it's inferior mesenteric is the most inferior vessel to pop off of the aorta. Now after this, you can see that it splits. Okay, everyone see that split? Every time we have a vessel that splits, it gets a new name. So each side of this now becomes the common iliac. Okay, so remember the hip region, right? Thinking back to those bones, so it's iliac region. So now we have the common iliac on either side, and you'll notice too that when we have a vessel that's named the common something, or a nerve that's called the common something, that's kind of an indication that it's going to split, okay? So since we have the common iliac, we know it's going to split into the internal and external. So look on the sides of this, you'll be able to see that one of these arteries goes outside of the bone, one dives deep into the bone, okay? The one that goes deep is the internal, the one that goes more lateral, external, okay? And you'll be able to see this with both the veins and the arteries in this region, okay? You'll see that those two sections are symmetrical here. They run right next to each other. All right, last we have the femoral. You'll be able to see the femoral because it's going to be in the leg region, right? Just like where we saw the femoral nerve. And it's basically as soon as we're out of the os coxa region, okay? So we can see the hip line right here. As soon as we're past the hip line and actually into the leg, femoral, okay? We have our artery on this side and I think our vein on this side. And we can also see the femoral in our muscle leg models. So if we look at this guy here, again, femoral is going to be on the anterior side, just like we saw on the nerve. And you can see that there's a yellow, a red, and a blue vessel going down. They all have the same name, femoral. It's so easy, right? So the yellow one, femoral nerve, red one, femoral artery, blue one, femoral vein. Okay? Awesome. So there's a little bit more I want to cover with the human skull and artery model, but that's it for the general models, okay? Any questions? Great. Okay, so